So the second resolution then is ending trafficking of women into sexual exploitation. And this is proposed by Virginia Hitch, who is an NCW member, who will be joining us on Zoom. And it's actually going to be seconded by Agnes Tolmie, I believe, or Susan McKellar from the Scottish Women's Convention. So Virginia, are you available? You are indeed, as I turn over my shoulder. Virginia, welcome.
Thank you. It's my first opportunity to be with you today. Can I just check my sound's okay? Because I was wearing a headset and I did a sound check and it wasn't good, so I'm taking that off.
You sound fine.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for this opportunity today. I feel very privileged. So I'll read out the text and then I just want to kind of make some comments, if that's okay. So the resolution is ending trafficking of women into sexual exploitation. NCW in conference assembled calls on the government to incorporate prostitution and trafficking of women into the violence against women and girls strategy, recognizing trafficking and exploitation of women and girls as forms of VAWG, with clear targets to reduce prevalence. Ensure that perpetrators of trafficking are held accountable for their crimes against women via the criminal justice system. Educate and train public officers on the dangers of victim blaming. Build a holistic program to rehabilitate women after drug use and help them sustain suitable paid employment. Tackle demand, making it socially unacceptable, and invest in the social research into the Nordic model. Shut down all the designated websites that are used in the sale of women for adult services. Require the tech companies to identify and disrupt the use of their services to arrange and promote trafficking of women into sexual exploitation. Ensure that staff in the border agency, the transport, air, ferry, and truck industries, the hospitality sector, especially hotels, are trained to recognise trafficking of women into sexual exploitation. Identify patterns of financial transfers suggested of trafficking through the banking industry. Modern slavery is one of the most devastating yet least visible forms of violence against women and girls. It takes many forms, including sexual exploitation, domestic servitude, and forced marriage. In 2024, in the UK, almost 5,000 women and girls were referred as potential victims to the National Referral Mechanism, the UK's framework for identifying and support potential victims of modern slavery. This is the highest figure ever recorded. Yet these numbers are a tip of the iceberg. Most cases seem hidden. Women and girls are being targeted, trapped, and exploited simply because of their sex. Perpetrators thrive in systems that normalise the commodification of women and girls, with online platforms and global trafficking networks, normalising and enabling abuse at unprecedented scale. Unless modern slavery is addressed head-on, the government's ambitions to halve VAWG within the next decade will fail. Social housing, legal aid, and trauma-informed mental health care are needed for women trafficked into sexual exploitation, regardless of immigration status. Survivors of exploitation often face fragmented, unstable, or even non-existent support. Without targeted, reliable health, we risk re-traumatizing those we claim to protect. Regulatory reform and enforcement of the Online Safety Act is needed to disrupt trafficking in digital spaces. Evidence indicates that organised crime groups operating in the UK are increasingly using the internet, and in particular adult services websites, to facilitate the exploitation. Ring-fence resources are needed for specialised trafficking and exploitation servicing, closing the current funding gap for underfunded areas like sexual exploitation, which for too long have been sidelined in national strategies. Empowering and listening to those with lived experience will help to drive reform. For policy and legislation to work then, it must be shaped by the people it is meant to serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. Is it, Susan, is it you who are going to second, or Agnes?
Yes, it's myself, Susan. Can you hear me okay?
Lovely. Thank you, Susan. We can. We'll get your picture up in just a second as well.
Thank you.
Lovely. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Dear Chair and fellow delegates, I rise to second this vital resolution ending trafficking of women into sexual exploitation. This is not just a policy issue, it's a matter of justice, dignity and human rights. The Scottish Women's Convention has long recognised that prostitution and trafficking are not isolated issues, but they're deeply interconnected forms of violence against women and girls. We recently held a conference on the Prostitution Offences and Support Bill and inputted into Scottish Parliament's consultation on the bill, and we've made it clear that commercial sexual exploitation is not a choice. It's a consequence of inequality, coercion and survival under pressure. The Unbuyable Bill in Scotland, introduced by MSP Ash Regan, represents a compassionate and progressive shift in Scotland's approach. It proposes to criminalise the purchase of sex while decriminalising those who are exploited, offering them support, safety and a path to recovery. This aligns with the Nordic model, which has proven effective in reducing demand and disrupting trafficking networks. Let me be clear, trafficking thrives on demand. It's fuelled by systems that commodify women, enabled by online platforms and sustained by silence. Like the previous speaker had said, 5,000 women and girls were referred as potential victims of modern slavery in the UK, and this is just not good enough. This resolution rightly calls for integration of trafficking and prostitution into the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy with clear targets to reduce prevalence. It also counts for accountability for perpetrators, not for the victims. It also calls for training for public officers, border staff and hospitality workers to spot and stop exploitation. It calls for a disruption of digital trafficking, including shutting down adult service websites, holding tech companies to account, and investment in survivor-led support, which includes housing, legal aid and trauma-informed care. Our Scottish Government refreshed trafficking and exploitation strategy and is taking a public health approach, recognising the need to address the root causes and support survivors holistically. Police Scotland too have backed the bill, acknowledged that buying sex is a form of exploitation and those that are selling sex are often vulnerable and have need of support. This resolution is not just timely, it's essential. If we're serious about ending violence against women and girls, we must tackle the systems that enable trafficking and exploitation. We must reframe the shame, shift the burden from the exploited to the exploiters, and build a society where no woman is for sale. I urge you to support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. Great, two very powerful presentations. Thank you so much. Right, we're doing very well on time. I wonder, would it be helpful if on your tables you just have a couple of minutes to sorry, Anne? Yes, Yeah, indeed. We'll come in the discussion. Yes, yeah, thank you. Yes, thanks for just pointing that out. I just wonder if it would be good in your tables if you just have an opportunity to discuss your thoughts about the resolution so that you can then comment. And then, yes, indeed, we're delighted to have Lynn Elliott from White Ribbon with us here today. And I know Lynn wants to contribute to the discussion, but can I suggest that we do that as part of the discussion? Is that okay? Yeah, yeah. Right, so have a little talk amongst yourselves on your tables, and then we'll pick that up. Thank you. Okay, everyone. Lovely. I thought that would just be helpful to have a little bit of a chance to chat. Okay, can I ask now for comments and observations about the resolution on trafficking that we've heard? And actually, can I ask Lynn Elliott from White Ribbon to make a contribution? I think now would be fine, because it might very well trigger some more thoughts and debate.
How long are you giving?
Oh, how long shall I give you, Lynn? 5 minutes?
5 minutes, okay. Oh, I've just lost my timer that tells me how long I'm going on for, because I can talk for England, me. So you have to be careful and you have to tell me when to stop, otherwise I will just get carried away with myself. Okay. Right, good morning, everybody. Everybody online and everybody in the room. Thank you so much for letting me speak today. I am Lynn Elliott and I'm the Chief Executive of White Ribbon UK, which is a charity which is about engaging men to end violence against women and girls. So this is a topic, and the whole theme of today is very close to my heart. I am actually also a member of the National Council, so here, doubly delighted to be here today and be speaking to you. And also I'm the lucky person that I haven't been given so much of a topic, so I'm going to talk to you a bit more generally. And one of the things that I wanted to say is, in this country, when we talk about gender-based violence, we are using it as a bit of an umbrella term. So I'm hoping that this afternoon, when you come on to some of the other topics, you'll open your thinking out a little bit about what we mean when we say violence against women and girls, because this morning we're talking about some quite extreme violence, female genital mutilation, trafficking. When we talk about violence against women and girls, we think of it often to help us understand what we're talking about as a spectrum. So female genital mutilation and trafficking, rape and murder are on a very extreme end of that spectrum. But we know from looking at perpetrators and researching into the men that carry out this violence, we know it's rooted in gender stereotypes. So the starting end of that spectrum is a belief or a set of attitudes that women don't count, that they're not equal, that they're not important, they don't deserve the same chances or the same respect as men. And I wasn't going to say this word, but because you have said it, I am going to say we live in a global patriarchy. So the system is set up against women from the beginning, and that's where some of this comes from. It's those harmful attitudes, and they appear first in what you might think of as quite mild behaviours, and you wouldn't think necessarily that they came under this umbrella of violence. But it can just be displayed by dismissing women, ignoring women, not giving them the space to speak. Often it's about jokes. I'm sure you've all heard lots of jokes and banter, which doesn't really exist, does it? Which is detrimental to women. And it's about objectifying women and judging them on their looks and seeing them as sexual objects and not as people in the world. So we move through that spectrum and we move through harassment, sexual harassment, physical assault, sexual assault, to the extreme end that we've just been talking about today. And I use a distressing example, so be ready, because it is distressing. If we look at the murder of Sarah Everard, which happened in this country a few years ago, she was kidnapped and then raped and murdered, and her body was burned by Wayne Cousins, who was a serving London Met police officer. Because he was a serving police officer, there was a huge inquiry into how we got to that state and how his behaviour ended up where it did. which was the Angiolini inquiry. I can never say that word. And there was a report. So we know from looking at his behaviour, like many other perpetrators, that he started off as a young man with just a dismissive behaviour towards women, a poor attitude, jokes, banter, invading women's personal spaces, going up to women he'd never met before and asking them out. His first criminal offence was indecent exposure, and then he moved through that spectrum, physical assault, sexual assault, into rape and murder. We know from that research that if somebody had intervened in his behaviour at any point along that spectrum, Sarah Everard might still be alive today. So one of the things that I want to say to you as a conference and as an organisation is please don't only focus on the extreme end of that spectrum, because if we work at the beginning, at the starting point of that spectrum, then we can stop some of these things from happening. My organisation is all about engaging men to work in that prevention end of the spectrum, to make them aware of their own behaviours and to get them to talk to other men. And we kind of celebrate that and encourage that to happen on White Ribbon Day every year on the 25th of November. I have bought some white ribbons. I will put them out on the table if you want to take one away to wear it on the day, or take one to give to a man you know to wear on the day, please do. But I guess my personal challenge to you as women in the room is that we all engage in those harmful gender stereotypes, because we were all brought up by women and men who also were brought up by women and men, and we perpetuate those. So my challenge is to think about what you're doing that perpetuate those gender stereotypes and how you could change your behaviour as a role model, especially if you're an older person like me, or even older than me, which some of you are in the room. Think about your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren and what kind of role model you are for them. If you display the behaviour that women are equal to men, and if you challenge yourself when you fall into those gender stereotypes, as I do every time I expect my husband to take the bins out, and in various other ways, then you're passing that on. So please think about your own behaviour, but please also be reassured that that is the solution. If we want to end violence against women and girls, we all need to work down in this starting end of the spectrum to make sure that nobody ends up at the extreme end. So there is a lot of hope for future generations, but it's down to all of us to take some responsibility for making that happen, as you are today. So thank you very much for inviting me. I have gone a little bit over. You let me. I'm so impressed that you let me. Thank you.
Lynn, thank you so much. I think actually you've really brought us to a very important point in discussing this whole issue of violence against women and trafficking, because trafficking will only happen where all of the things that you talk about in our own behaviour and our culture are allowing it to happen. So thank you very much for bringing it back to the personal, if you like, because I think some of these issues often can seem so big that we can't do anything about them as individuals and in our own communities. But I think what you have highlighted is that there are ways that we can change, and making small changes and small steps will gradually have a change. It will have a change. I think, as Jackie said so powerfully, you know, we are the voice of the voiceless, and we need to remember to be that. But I think also you've highlighted that really important issue of this continuum of behaviour that then eventually leads to violence. And I'd be really interested in anyone's comments or thoughts about that, or examples of how they have perhaps changed, you know, your own behaviour or others have, and how you've influenced. Because I think as you were describing that continuum from, you know, dismissive behaviour through to exposure, through to murder, you think, well, where would the intervention happen in that sequence? Who is responsible for doing that? How do we try to ensure that that intervention does take place? So yeah, any thoughts or comments on any part of that? I've got two comments on the chat. Bharti Patel saying, I agree with the resolution and the comments made. To add this, can I raise this? Which is Barty. Are you there? Would you like to make the point yourself? Is Barty there, Keith? Okay,
Hi everyone.
lovely. Thank you, Barty. It'd be a change from my voice. Would you like to make your point?
Sure, and I'm so sorry that I can't join you with my video on because I'm having some technical issue, hence me typing, but I'm glad you can hear me. So my name is Bharti Patel, and I've been in this sector for, gosh, very long time, working particularly on how to end child trafficking for all kind of abuses, not just sexual abuse. And I was leading an organization called ECPAT UK, which continues to work on this issue and has made some major changes, including the lobbying of the Modern Slavery Act. So I just want to talk briefly about how the work that NCW is doing around this. And apologies if it's doing this already, and congratulations on that. But if I could just read out what I've said on the statement, that Theresa May, who headed our UK's Modern Slavery Act and worked tirelessly on this, despite some of our political differences, I'm going to put that on the side. I think she did a brilliant job, and she continues to do this now, having stepped down from the Parliament as a chair of the Global Commission on Modern Slavery and Human Trafficking. And I think this is quite vital. I'm sure the NCW members and yourselves are probably working with that organization, but the latest report basically highlighted that this issue is kind of getting off the agenda, the radar, because of various other issues coming into play, particularly the wars that we are talking about. So increasingly, people like Theresa May and, of course, NCW trying to get into this sector or raising this issue is a big challenge. But their report on the wake-up call is excellent. And I think if, again, the members have not seen this, this would be something that's worth looking at it. The third is that this resolution is brilliant, by the way. And so it would be good to send this off, if you haven't shared this with them already, just to seek their comments and advice on how do you translate our discussions into practical ground level action, because I think that would be missing from the kind of more of a global platform. And as a membership organization, it's something the NCW can really value add to their discussion. Does that help? I end there.
Lovely, Barty. Thank you so much. It does indeed. And we'll certainly, when we write as a result of hopefully the resolution being passed, we'll write obviously to our government, but we'll also contact the Global Commission on Modern Slavery and Human Trafficking. That's a great suggestion. Thank you. You mentioned a report. If you have the link to the report, if you could put it in the chat, then we can share that with everybody. That would be helpful. If not, you can email us and we'll circulate.
Yeah, sure. I'm in conversation with Anne on a regular basis through LinkedIn messages, but I can certainly do that.
Lovely. That would be helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Any comments or thoughts? Gillian? Yes. Just catch the microphone. Just make sure to hold the microphone up to your mouth so they can hear online, if you would.
Okay, just a quick question to Lynn. You're talking about engaging with at the beginning, before it all gets really out of hand. Are you going into schools?
Oh, yes. Thanks, Lynn.
Well done. We ourselves as White Ribbon don't, but our ambassadors and champions do. So we have 8,000 ambassadors and champions across the country who volunteered to be allies to women and girls and to speak up. So they do. We do give out schools resources for schools to use within schools, and we work in partnership with quite a few organisations that do go into schools and do workshops. And I'm sure some people will have seen the programme Adolescence on Netflix, which has increased people's awareness and concern about what's happening in schools with young boys in particular, but also with girls, and that kind of behaviour and how to stop it. So I think your point is really well made, because we have to start as young as possible, as well as starting as early down that spectrum as possible.
It's okay, they'll pick you up, Gillian.
Can you? Yes. It just came to mind because, sorry, I watch EastEnders. There's a storyline, a young schoolboy who's being influenced by an online influencer, and he's now attacked his stepmother. And it was really violent. People are querying that it was under the watershed as well.
That storyline, the BBC did actually speak to us and quite a few
they
other
would have
organisations
done.
in the sector
Yeah.
about that storyline, and they had been planning to make a documentary to run alongside it, where they spoke to people in various different communities about it. But I think that documentary has not happened and probably isn't going to happen now. But one of our trainers was going to be in that documentary, Luke, to talk about it. So that storyline is very realistic, although it's horrible. It is very realistic, and it has been informed by the experiences of people in real life.
Thank you.
That's very interesting that they consulted you at White Ribbon, and I think don't apologise for watching EastEnders for a moment, Gillian, because I think when these stories get into the media that lots and lots of people are listening to and watching, that's when they really begin to hit home, I think. So I think it's so important. And interesting you bring up the issue of education, because that's one of the things that we have been talking about, as to how one can get education for boys and girls in at as early a stage as possible. Yes, please, Lynn.
Can I just add a little bit to say that we know from the research we've done, and also the End Violence Against Women and Girls Coalition has done, we know that it's not just a question of getting lessons onto the school curriculum, which is what the government is very focused on at the moment, but we know from the young women and girls that we've spoken to, it's also about educating the staff. So we've got some really good examples of girls who've had some really awful comments made to them by head teachers, deputy head teachers, classroom teachers. And if we don't enforce that kind of understanding and behaviour change amongst all the adults in any school, including the dinner ladies, the caretaker, everybody who children kind of come into contact with when they're in that environment, again, it's the role modelling, isn't it? We won't get anywhere if we don't include everyone in that behaviour change.
Indeed. No, that's really helpful. We've got a comment from Susan McKellar in Scotland on the chat saying rape crisis and zero tolerance are doing work with schools in Scotland. And I know there's a man who does work in schools in England, Michael Conroy, and his organisation is Men at Work, and he works with young men on toxic masculinity and emotional intelligence. So I'm sure you're in touch with him. Yeah, that's great. We have a comment, Hilary?
Just a couple of things. Firstly, could we have a sort of paragraph about what the Nordic model is, so that can just be sent round to everybody just to give us a bit of understanding?
Yes.
And secondly, I read there was a report in the news recently, because we're talking about educating humans, but we need to educate AI, because there was a recent comment about AI doing some recruitment, and it perceived women as younger and less experienced than the men that they were supposedly recruiting through AI. So on top of having to educate humans, we have to educate the internet as well. So that's just
yes.
another thing to add to the list.
Yes, to the mix.
Yes.
Very important point. Yes, indeed. Susan, are you still there, Susan McKellar? I'm just
Yeah,
wondering.
yes, I
Oh,
am. I'm putting a link to the Nordic model onto the chat so that people can have a look at that, because that explains it all in great detail.
That would be lovely. Thank you. I'm just looking at our timing, whether you could you give us just a couple of minutes on the Nordic model?
Yep. The Nordic model was introduced in Sweden over 20 years ago to try and combat commercial sexual exploitation of women. So that's why it's called the Nordic model. It's basically the Nordic region that have adapted this. France have adapted it now. Northern Ireland and Ireland have also adapted this model. And what that does is it decriminalises the women who are involved in the exchange of sex for cash or for places to stay, whatever that comes under that commercial sexual exploitation. And from that, they would be decriminalised, but the people who are purchasing the sex would be criminalised because it's them that's creating the demand. And the whole thing about the Nordic model is what that's to do is it's to reduce the demand and to change the culture. And we can see in Sweden that that has done that. It's not got rid of prostitution fully, because that's a hard thing to do, but it has reduced that greatly. There is less murders, so less femicides, and they think that's to do with the culture of that. So that goes against other countries such as Germany, New Zealand, who have fully decriminalised and made this that anybody can purchase sex and anybody can sell sex. And what we're seeing in countries, because Germany are actually looking at their model now about changing that, because what they're seeing is an increase in human trafficking. I think it's 90-something% now are being trafficked into Germany to work in these big mega brothels. So the trafficking rates have shot up, the murders have increased, and the levels of organised crime have increased, because let's not get away from this, commercial sexual exploitation is organised crime. So they are now looking at maybe looking to change that because it's not working for them in Germany. So the Nordic model is the best way that if a woman is put into a situation where she has to sell or exchange sex to get by, to survive, then she's not criminalised for it. Because who else in the world like criminalises somebody for their exploitation? It's ridiculous. So the Nordic model is more compassionate for the people that are forced into that situation, but also to criminalise the people that are coming in to buy it. So focusing on the punters that are creating that demand to try and take that way. So that's it in a nutshell. I've put the Nordic model site on the website so people can go and have a look, and they've got lots of research into it where they've been doing this over 20 years to try and get this model fitted in. And if Scotland do it, then I think we've got a stronger case for the rest of the UK doing it, because Northern Ireland and Ireland are already there as well.
Super. Thank you, Susan. That's really great. And I realise the links are on the chat for all those who are watching on Zoom. What we will do is gather them together and circulate them to all of you. We might be able to put some of them on the screen if Keith can magically do it, so you can jot them down, but we will also circulate them, because I know it's frustrating if you know there was a link on the chat, but in the room you haven't got the access to that. Great. Any other comments or observations? Yes, indeed, over here. Yeah, they'll operate it from the side, don't worry. Just talk. Just talk and they'll catch it.
Okay, thank you. Avis Ball, and I am an individual member and quite a new member. We've had a couple of things mentioned that I wanted to pick up on. Under trafficking, I think we also need to think about county lines drug running, because the young girls that are involved in that now, it's equivalent to trafficking, because they very often end up being sexually exploited as well, and they're quite young, some of them. And the other thing is on AI, and I think this is a really serious one going forward, because it is now possible for a man to go online and to have a virtual experience online with a woman, although not real, who will agree to do anything that he wants her to do. And that then increases misogyny generally towards women. And this is a huge issue which is going to get worse as they develop AI. And there is a feeling that maybe because he's acting out all his fantasies in a virtual world, that that's safer. But in fact, you know, when you think what we heard about White Ribbon are doing, then actually young boys who have access, and girls, but young boys have access very, very early to pornography. I think that is a real worry. So whilst on the one hand, it's good that we're trying to do something, say, in schools, and recently my Sir Optimist Club, we've been involved with various organisations who are trying to educate young people. But I think it is something that is, we win some, we move forward, and then we find that AI and technology has moved faster. Indeed. So I think it's a real problem. Thank you.
No, that's a very good point. And one thing that, you know how it is, they come into my mind and flit it out again. We were talking with the Girl Guides Association recently, and they were telling us about their most recent survey of young girls between 14 and 18. And over 50%, I think it was nearly 80% of young girls are now adjusting their behavior at school and socially because of the misogyny that they are experiencing from boys, which was really shocking. So it is in so many aspects of society. Just one more comment. Thank you, Avis, for that very useful observation. Hold on, we have something. Barty has given us another organisation to reach out to, which we will, which is, it's a penalty. It uses large sports games to raise awareness, so we'll share the link about that. Sheila Eaton, who was a past president of NCW, welcome Sheila, lovely to see you. This discussion has been an excellent discussion, lots of connections NCW can work on. We've worked very closely with Theresa May when she was president, when Sheila was president, and she was Home Secretary. So this link needs to be revitalised. And Penny Rankin from NCW Canada, who'll be joining us a wee bit later, has said in Canada this is called the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act. It's interesting. By disrupting demand, this act harmonises penalties for trafficking and prostitution-related offences. That's quite an interesting, slightly different approach in the use of words. I think it's one of the instances perhaps where language is so important in this whole discussion, isn't it? So does anyone have any other points, comments they'd like to make, or we'll move to a vote on this resolution? Yes, Hilary.
I just thought of something, and I'm sort of throwing this in the mix as a sort of bit of a curveball. We're talking about ending trafficking and sexual exploitation, which is only a correct thing to do. But on the flip side, if you know, nature doesn't like a vacuum, or whatever that comment is, do we support, and it's all personal of course, legalising some form of sexual activity that is paid for? There are certain people in society who, shall we say, need support in that side of things, so they don't get that side of nature through the conventional way or relationships, and it can be to do with psychological issues, physical issues, or just your own personality. But there is a need there. And is it a need that could be supported in a safe environment for both parties, involving the person who's paying and the person who's being paid? And I think that's something that has to be discussed. And I know there are organisations who do discuss it, about legalising brothels and helping people with either physical or mental disabilities to still access that side of human life. And maybe it's something that has to be tagged on to this. If we stop this, do we support the other version to try and make things safe? Because it will always happen regardless, because that's human nature. So do we have a society that supports it in a better way? It's just a thought.
Just wait for the microphone, Gail. Okay, yes. Gail Bishop.
Gail Bishop, NCW. I have friends who work in the field of psychiatry, and they make the observation that some men who have unhealthy attitudes to women, particularly at the more extreme end, have themselves been abused in childhood. And I wonder, Lynn, if you've talked with men about that. I've heard it mentioned on the radio in relation to charities that support men. And linking it to Hilary's point, is there anything that we as a society can do to better support them?
Thank you. I'm sure I'm not the only person that could answer this question, so I feel like my voice is in the room a lot more than it should be, maybe. But yes, we do have some men who talk to us about their experiences of being abused, and any kind of abuse at any age is going to have a long-term effect on people, and they are going to need a lot of support, male or female. And I think probably most of us understand that and can recognise that. Having said that, lots of people who are abused don't go on to be abusers, and it kind of does lead me, if I'm allowed to say something just very general about violence and men's violence. When we talk about violence against women and girls in this country, we are predominantly talking about men's violence. 93% of murders in this country are carried out by men. 99% of rapes in this country are carried out by men. There is a small amount of women being violent to men and women being violent to other women, but it's a very small percentage. So why are men violent? That's the question, isn't it? How do they get to be violent? So that goes back to that continuum that I was talking about, and what happens to us when we're growing up, and our attitudes and behaviours about equality. Men are violent to each other, and they are violent to themselves. We have a very high suicide rate in this country, and a lot of the suicides are quite violent. So there is something about men growing up to be violent, and that relates back to the point that was made earlier about toxic masculinity, which we try not to say too much, and we try to talk about positive masculinity and work with men about how they can be positive. But it is to do with us holding, all of us, holding men in those gender stereotypes that expect them to be strong, to not talk about their feelings, to never be vulnerable, and to be dominant. So there are a lot of role models for young men, for boys, but also for older men. So if you heard Gareth Southgate do his Dimbleby lecture, that was really what he was talking about, is how can we have role models for people so they don't behave in that way. So I think it's violence itself is a huge problem, isn't it, for men? And we're on the receiving end of it.
Yeah, indeed.
I'm sorry, I rather hijacked Hilary's question, so I don't know if somebody wants to respond to Hilary, because I rather
Yes, although I'm just conscious of time, but Susan certainly has commented, which I was going to say, that no women should be bought or sold for any man's needs, and prostitution is never sale. I don't know if you want to add to that, Susan, or I was going to suggest this is a really important topic, and I think it's one that we've begun talking about when we've been talking about the Nordic model, because personally, I think there is an issue such as the one that Hilary has raised, and I think Gail's been alluded to, that needs to be considered in this. But the resolution as we have it in front of us is about trafficking, and I wonder whether we should take from this fascinating discussion that, as it were, this other side of it is one that we should continue to debate. And Susan, I know you've done a lot of work in Scotland about this, and it does relate to the principles of the Nordic model as well, I believe, and whether that should be a topic that we look at separately. Delphine, yes. Yeah.
I've been thinking exactly that all the way through this. I think you just need to retitle this resolution if you're going to send it up to government, because we've not been talking about trafficking, we've been talking about exploitation of women and abuse and things. And I really think that's quite a different topic, the trafficking.
I'm not sure if we simply retitle it, whether the content of the resolution will still stand. Virginia, are you on the line as the proposer of the resolution?
Yes, I am, thank you.
And you've, I'm sure, been listening to the debate.
I have indeed. I don't think the answer is as always, is quite complex, isn't it? So I'm wondering whether how best to proceed, you know, how best maybe we proceed with this. I'm probably the least experienced on this. It's something I've come to only quite recently, and I wonder whether that's, I suppose there's two options, isn't it? You go ahead and vote on this and then have an action maybe to look into the other issues, or you, I don't know, you take the action, the resolution offline and go away and work through what needs to happen.
I'd be inclined to go for the first option, and you've got a thought on this, I think.
Yes, I mean, we've had a very interesting discussion on the Nordic model. This resolution is actually a bit more confined, and I think it's good that it talks about trafficking of women into sexual exploitation. And we have been working with the Commissioner on Anti-Slavery, who is going to speak later, and they are putting the point that this is part of violence against women and girls, which this resolution makes that point. As to the Nordic model, all this resolution says is that we should invest in the social, by implication, existing social research into the Nordic model. So we're not actually proposing the Nordic model in this resolution. No. But we are saying it needs to be looked at. Yeah. So I think this resolution fits in with the discussion fine and could stay as it is.
Yeah, that would be my feeling. And I think, if I may, Delphine, I don't think it should be retitled, because I think it is about trafficking. And I think there is another debate to be had, which is expanding exactly on the point that you've raised, Hilary, and Lynn and Gail. And that will relate to the Nordic model. We're not advocating the wholesale adoption of the Nordic model, because I think there are other arguments, and really want to talk to our Scottish colleagues about that and their experience. So in the light of that, is everyone happy then if we move to vote on this resolution as it stands, in the context of the fascinating and I think extremely important debate that we've had that goes much more broadly? Yeah, is everyone happy? Lovely. So can I ask all those of you in the room and online with your little yellow hands to indicate that you approve the resolution as it stands, please? Just let Sheila count.
I've voted.
It's okay. We have a cunning method of counting, double counting. Don't worry. Is there anyone against the resolution? Keith, are you indicating we've got some online? Okay, thank you. Thank you. So no one against. Any abstentions? in the room or online? Can't see any online. Great. Okay, thank you, and thank you everyone, and Lynn particularly for contributing and giving us that other perspective, and all the debate that we've had on that resolution. I think that's really useful and important, and will give us a lot to think about in the future. Thank you so much, everyone. Right, we've got a short break, which we will have, although we're running a tiny bit over, and give you a chance to go to the loo, which is at the back of the room. I think there may be coffee out there, but there's certainly water and squash at the side of the room. And do just stretch your legs a little bit. So 10 minutes and then back again. What's the temperature like? Would you like it a little cooler? It's getting quite warm up here. Is everyone all right? That's probably me.